The Mongols and China. The objectives are: 1. Discuss how the Mongols acquired the world's largest land empire. And 2nd, relate how, with the mingling of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, a new religious philosophic system emerged. Now, the Mongol Empire is really based around the nomadic tribe to the north, the Mongols. They were a pastoral people. They were loosely organized into clans in Mongolia and the Gobi Desert. Now, these pastoral people were primarily herders of various animals, which, of course, made them nomadic, and nomads typically were brilliant warriors, particularly because they had all kinds of time to practice their raiding techniques, their military strategies. And usually it's quite odd for us to see nomadic groups that aren't brilliant warriors. And particularly we see this come to fruition when we see Temujin elected as Genghis Khan, that is, the strong ruler, in the 1160s. And what he does is really unify the people together. The unification of the tribal groups on the Eurasian landmass is largely what he's responsible for. Now, these Mongol nomadic peoples were, again, nomadic and moved from place to place. Here we see a more modern picture of Mongolian Eurasian steppe people living in their tents. And this was typically what life must have been like. And so you could see that they were particularly mobile and men, typically strong military-minded guys. And under Genghis Khan's leadership, the Mongols spread east and west, really creating the largest land empire in history. Now, once this massive empire is created, Genghis Khan died in 1227, and the administration of this massive empire was left to his sons. So in a broad picture, without going into incredible detail, we end up seeing that, according to Mongol custom, the territory of that massive empire was divided into really separate territories called Khanates, which were controlled by one of his sons. And it's really under these Mongol tribes, and particularly driven by his own sons, that they attack the Persians, that they overthrow the Abbasids, that they attack the Chinese Song dynasty. And so under their authority, we end up seeing a massive transformation of the entire region and landscape. And particularly we want to emphasize Kublai Khan, who really led the conquest of the Song dynasty. And he ended up establishing Mongol rule in China. And he founded what would later be called Beijing, a very important city through world history in Asia. And so it's really Kublai Khan that we end up talking about the rule of the Mongols in China. Now, in China, they encountered gunpowder, fire lances, and other sorts of steel weaponry and technology that they had never encountered before. Now, their nomadic skill on horseback, which is really what made them so successful, was still no match for them. But inevitably what they end up doing is incorporating these technologies into their own techniques and military strategies, which makes the Mongols inevitably much more powerful. Now, the Mongol expansion inevitably went into Vietnam, to Java, to Sumatra, all into that Southeast Asian territory. They made several attempts at attacking Japan. So the Mongols really, they adapted to the Chinese environment. They adapted the Chinese political system. They adapted it technologically and socially and culturally to the regions that they conquered. Now, what's particularly important is when they settle into China, they adopt much of the political system that we're used to. They cease being nomadic, which was really, in some sense, their great power. And they really become Sinified, that the Chinese influence their culture. But what's interesting is that the Mongols brought in incredible prosperity and stability into China in an age where China is searching for that stability. After the Han fell, chaotic, tumultuously civil war time where things are not unified. And inevitably through searches of stability, and you see some kingdoms and dynasties bringing stability gradually, we end up seeing that the Mongols brought an incredible stability to the region. And inevitably, however, the Mongols fell victim to really the same problems that had always plagued dynasties and kingdoms in the region. They fell victim to finances, foreign conquest, corruption, internal instability, civil war, civil strife. Now, all of these sorts of things that have been the major themes for why a particular Chinese dynasty collapses is exactly why Mongol rule collapses, first internally, then externally. Now, inevitably, a commoner led an army and overthrew Mongol rule in China. But during this period, we also see major social changes occurring, particularly in religion and government. We see the spread of Buddhism brought by missionaries and merchants from India into China through that Silk Road trade routes. And we end up seeing in the early Tang dynasty, the early rulers really lent their support to Buddhism, and it allowed for Buddhism to really flourish in China. Now, initially, of course, Buddhism was highly criticized by people. Why? Because particularly the kinds of philosophies that had dominated China were not really religious in a particular sense. Remember, Confucianism, legalism, in some sense even Taoism were answers philosophically for the search of stability, and that they were very terrestrial rather than celestial. They were very focused on the here and now, the earth, rather than getting to heaven. And so, of course, this becomes problematic in the sense that Buddhism, at least in some sense, which we will see, has an ethereal eye, has a focus on the end, has a focus on the soul leaving the body to nirvana or moksha, cessation of existence. Now, inevitably, the Buddhists that establish themselves there end up creating monasteries, and much of the monastic lands that end up falling into their hands, they have total control over that territory, which, of course, the political powers that be will not necessarily look upon this with favor. But in reaction to this, we end up seeing an adaptation from the other indigenous philosophies that we've seen before, and Confucianism in particular. Now, Confucianism remains and will remain a major theme in China, determining the destiny for hundreds of years. But it wasn't the old political philosophy that Confucius had created, but, in fact, Neo-Confucianism was a response to the popularity of Buddhism and of Taoism. We end up seeing a new emphasis not just on politics, but on a dividing line between the physical and the spiritual. And it ends up focusing on the fact that one can leave the physical through careful examination of the moral principles. That if we meditate on the moral principles of Confucianism, that we can leave the physical and go to the ethereal spiritual, which is really a certain kind of blend of Buddhism and Confucianism in China, which becomes quite popular at the time. Now, the objectives were, 1, discuss how the Mongols acquired the world's largest land empire, and 2, relate how, with the mingling of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, a new religious philosophic system emerged.